Dragons! I used to have a really apathetic view towards DreamWorks Studios. It seemed like every time they put out something good, they would turn right back around and put out something mediocre, if not outright terrible. They stayed off my radar for the most part, and because of that, I was very late to the party when they released their greatest franchise!
Welcome to Dragon Training! Today, you will learn to fight dragons.
Pain. Love it.
Let's get started!
How to Train Your Dragon was an unexpectedly great movie for me. I thought it was going to be another blasé kids flick, but oh boy was I wrong. The movie had action, comedy, heart, a lesson about bridging differences, and as the nostalgia critic put it, it had a liar revealed storyline that didn't suck. In fact, I liked it so much, I named my car Night Fury. The movie came out in 2010 and was a smash hit, earning almost $500 million in the box office. 4 years later, the sequel did even better, and the third movie, while not as captivating as the other two, was still a lot of fun. But as breathtaking as the movies are, the books are actually very different. Author Cressida Cowell has written more than a dozen books in the How to Train Your Dragon series, including some side books like the Complete Book of Dragons. The books are very much aimed at kids, with crude drawings and goofy characters with odd names like Hiccup, Fishlegs, Snotlout, and one poor kid named Dog's Breath the Duh Brain. No boy. Do not get me started on how different Toothless is. We'll get into the differences within the review, but there is still a very youthful charm about the books. Apparently, Cowell grew up on an island off the coast of Scotland and believed that there were dragons living there when she was a kid. These books genuinely feel like a slice of that childhood brought to life, and I gotta respect her for being able to conjure an immature but fun story like this. But the books and movies are vastly different and tell very different stories. How different are they? Well, let's find out for ourselves as we soar through How to Train Your Dragon. Away, Toothless! So after a few logos and some quick exposition, we see that the movie chose to start off right, with a healthy dose of arson.
Dragons.
The island of Berk is under attack from their local pests, a swarm of dragons. The village is home to Vikings, fierce warriors of the north and fully capable of fending off this dangerous threat. Well, everyone except our main character is.
What are you doing here?
Get inside!
Getting out!
Get back inside!
This is Hiccup, or as he's known in the book, Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, and he's voiced by Jay Baruchel.
Great name, I know, but it's not the worst.
He's an outsider within his village because he's too scrawny to fight a dragon and has the tendency to get in the way or make things worse.
Every time you step outside, disaster falls. Can you not see that I have bigger problems?
The book also started with a bit of action, though with a much different setup. Dragon Trainer was already a well-established job title. The Vikings of Berk didn't try to exterminate dragons, and they didn't have long vendettas against dragonkind. They saw dragons as work animals, like mules or horses. Dragons were trained to help with hunting and fighting. Hiccup and the rest of his class were training to become dragon trainers, and their first task was to sneak into a nest of hibernating dragons and steal a few eggs, one for each of them. And you guessed it, Hiccup managed to grab Toothless for himself. Things of course go wrong when someone wakes up a dragon, so the boys all have to run for their lives, but they get away. Unfortunately, Toothless was the smallest dragon out of the entire lot. Since size is very important for guys, Hiccup kept his pariah status. In both the book and movie, Hiccup is also the son of the Viking chief Stoic the Vast. Hiccup's build and character in the book is pretty much what you see in the movie, though his relationship with others is different. He keeps to himself, is somewhat analytical, and doesn't have many friends. In fact, his only friend at the start of the series is the cowardly but determined Fishlegs. Hiccup alone was permitted by Viking law to own a monstrous nightmare, one of the more fearsome types of dragons. Instead, that dragon went to his bullying cousin, Snotlout. So yeah, those two are cousins. Kinda changes their character dynamic, doesn't it? Snotlout is the son of Stoic's younger brother, Spitelout, who I am required to point out is voiced by David Tennant.
A spitelout got a singed tail. I think I'll send a terror mail so everyone will see they cannot fool with me because I'm Spitelout, Spitelout, oi, 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 Spitelout, Spitelout, oi, oi, oi.
Everything David Tennant does is either awesome, hilarious, or both.
Track you down with this. This is my timey-wimey detector. Goes ding when there's stuff. Also, it can boil an egg at 30 paces.
In a desperate bid to contribute to the opening dragon fight, Movie Hiccup uses a bullet launcher to snag a dragon. Specifically, a dragon so fast and dangerous, no one has even so much as seen it.
Night Fury! Get down!
Hiccup manages a lucky shot and shoots down the attacking Night Fury. While Stoic plans to seek out and raid the dragon's nest, Hiccup wanders into the woods to find his quarry. While he does manage to find the fallen Night Fury, he doesn't have the gall to finish the dragon off, and instead lets him go. This, fortunately, doesn't lead to Hiccup's bloody dismemberment. And can I say real quick that the detail they put into Toothless's eyes here is just awe-inducing? Though I'm not sure Hiccup would admire them since he's busy crapping himself out of sheer trauma. With the village in danger, Stoic allows the teenagers of the island to take part in dragon training to learn how to fight drakes, worms, dracons, and the like. And these are actually some great exposition scenes. Not only do we learn about the various dragon types under the tutelage of Gobber the Belch, or just Gobber in the movie, but we also learn who the other teens on the island are, and believe it or not, but they've all been changed too. Gobber is kind of an easy-natured buddy in the movie. A little lax perhaps, but he clearly knows what he's talking about.
Ladders are quick and light on their feet. Your job is to be quicker and lighter.
Movie Gobber was a little more enjoyable than Book Gobber, who was pretty much what you'd get when you combine a football coach, a drill sergeant, and a wicked hangover. Book Gobber made more sense within his respective universe, however. He had to condition a bunch of kids into dragon training, which wasn't an easy task even for an accomplished Viking. Then there are the teens. Of the lot of them, Fishlegs is the most like his literary counterpart. He's quick on his feet and is often nervous or afraid.
Oh, I'm hurt! I am very much hurt!
Chances of survival are dwindling into single digits now.
He's a bit more analytical in the movie, pulling up stats on different dragon types, but in the movie he isn't really Hiccup's friend. Well, not until Hiccup's popularity boost later in the movie anyway. Like I said before, Snotlout was a bully who regularly mocked Hiccup. He did so because he wanted to take over as chief of the village, which was Hiccup's right by birth. That role as bully is still there in the movie, but it's downplayed. Snotlout is more concerned with getting Astrid's attention.
So anyway, I moved into my parents' basement. You should come by sometime to work out. You look like you work out.
Rough Nut was just Rough Nut Jr. in the book, and he was pretty much just an extra, or at least in the first book. The movie fleshed him out and gave him more of a gross-out personality to play off his twin sister. And Tough Nut and Astrid don't exist. While I haven't finished the series as of recording this, there don't seem to be any notable characters with those names. Tough Nut looks like she was made up entirely. Now, there is a girl named Kamikaze from a tribe of female Vikings called the Bog Burglars who almost fits the bill for Astrid. She's persistent, a natural fighter, and was very confident in her abilities. And her dragon is also named Stormfly. But future romantic interest? She's more likely to kneecap Hiccup.
Here we go.
Ow! Why would you do that?
That's for the lies. That's for everything else.
One last note on the training scenes is the info we get about the dragons.
The deadly Nada.
Speed 8, armor 16.
The hideous Zippleback.
11 stealth times 2.
The monstrous Nightmare.
Firepower 15.
The terrible Terror.
Attack 8, venom 12.
Can you stop that?
The movies have their own scales to judge dragons by, but the complete Book of Dragons side book lists only 5 categories: attack, speed, size, fear factor, and disobedience. The novels went into a little more details, with things like radar, poison, and what the dragons were armed with. Also, the gauge in the book stopped at 10, where the movie seems to go up to at least 20, because bigger numbers are better.
Right across the board. 11, 11,
and most of
11,
the
and then
amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Though there is one thing that the movie really dropped the ball with.
All dragons have a limited number of shots. How many does a Gronkle have?
5? No, 6!
Correct, 6! That's one for each of you.
The movie tried to limit how much dragons could use their fire breath, but the movie never does anything with it. Hell, this point was so irrelevant the second and third movies dropped it completely. It even seems completely discounted in the final fight scene. How many shots does Toothless get off? Also, this seems to count fireballs, but how are we supposed to count continuous sprays like what the Nightmare used during the opening scene? Does it go off percentage like a fuel gauge? The book wisely stayed away from this point, but it does explain that a dragon's fire is a combination of fuel and a spark, but it originates inside a dragon's throat. So in both mediums, dragons are basically flamethrowers. That sounded a lot more poignant in my head. The first dragon lesson goes pretty poorly, highlighted by Hiccup nearly getting killed.
Remember, a dragon will always go for the kill.
So why didn't you?
However, surviving his encounter with the Night Fury leads Hiccup to investigate where he last saw the elusive dragon, and that leads to a small recess in the woods. Hiccup takes the chance to study Toothless, and goes on to study as much about dragons as he can. And that means hitting the books.
The Dragon Manual. Everything we know about every dragon we know of.
It's funny because Gobber provided the Dragon Manual in the book too, although there he proudly stole it from the Meathead Public Library on the neighboring island. Don't follow his example, kids. Support your local library. But what if the library isn't your local one? Oh, then they're up for a full-on raid. So Hiccup gets to researching, but comes up a little short.
Night Fury. Speed unknown. Size unknown. The unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. Never engage this dragon. Your only chance, hide and pray it does not find you.
He asks Gobber, but that doesn't do much either.
So how would one sneak up on a Night Fury?
No one's ever met one and lived to tell the tale. Now get in there!
Since he has no resources to rely upon for Night Fury information, and since he's such a complete failure in dragon training, Hiccup goes off on his own to meet the fallen dragon, and he starts with a peace offering.
Toothless. I could have sworn you had... teeth.
This is something that I feel the movie didn't get quite right. At the start of the first book, Toothless actually was Toothless, though he did have one tooth very briefly. The movie immediately shows that Toothless has teeth, so the name doesn't really work, even if Toothless can simply retract his teeth. It feels like the movie's writers knew that a literally toothless dragon would be a detriment, but they didn't know how to properly work in the Toothless name from the books. And that is the longest dental-related rant I have ever done on this show. Come back next month when we discuss how fluoride is actually part of a sinister plot by the Russians. Through multiple interactions, Hiccup learns one important lesson. That lesson being that this dragon is adorable. And it's not just that, but Toothless, as Hiccup starts calling him, is perhaps the best dragon of all dragons of all time ever. Farewell, Falcor. So long, Shenron. Go fuck yourself, Smog. Toothless is the shiny new dragon to love. The movie made several distinct choices to make Toothless stand out as well as he does. Most of them center around Toothless being a cat. The internet loves cats. Toothless loves scritches, he rolls around on his back, he curls up when he sleeps, eats fish, and he likes chasing little beams of light. Now I've heard people say that he's also like a dog because Hiccup teaches him tricks and how to fly again, but that's a weak argument. Cats can learn tricks if you know what you're doing. There you go. Good boy. Good boy. But the Toothless from the book was a vastly different dragon. For starters, and this may shock you, but he could talk. Part of the reason he and Hiccup bonded over the series was because Hiccup was able to speak Dragonese, the language of the dragons. It was an odd language that humans can't speak very well because we don't have forked tongues. And Toothless wasn't a Night Fury in the book. When Hiccup and Fishlegs first discovered Toothless, they didn't know what he was. He was actually a tiny little dragon, and even after months of growth, he was still much smaller than Hiccup.
Ha! It's like the size of my... Oh, get it off!
To placate Stoic for his son's pitifully small dragon, Fishlegs called Toothless a toothless daydream, a species that he just made up. Toothless's real species is revealed much later in the series, but he's not a Night Fury. That seemed to be something made up entirely for the movie. And then there's Toothless's personality. Much like one of my cats, he was a complete brat. Part of training a dragon was getting through their stubborn hides. All dragons are inherently selfish and disobedient, and Toothless was no exception. The book even gave us several examples of Toothless pooping inside the house, a detail that I didn't realize that I was glad was missing from the movie. Dragon training was incredibly simple though, thanks in part to the Dragon Manual's extensively researched and thoroughly tested methods. Yell at it. That's literally all it says. Hiccup took the revolutionary approach of trying to be nice. He traded jokes with Toothless to train him, which sort of worked. Toothless was still a complete brat, but at least he would hunt fish. So I guess the book's dragons were also cats. The movie then gives us a few scenes of Hiccup studying Toothless and training with the other teenagers, and because of his studies, he understands aspects of dragons that no one else has been able to comprehend before. And these studies have earned him a lot of new attention, as well as jealousy from Astrid, who had been the top badass among the teens beforehand.
Wow, he's better than you ever were.
But then there's the matter of why Toothless remains inside the small rocky alcove with little food.
Why don't you just fly away?
The movie's indirect about it, but Toothless must have lost half his tail fin from his crash in the forest.
No, it's the wings and the tails you really want. If it can't fly, it can't get away.
So Hiccup begins crafting a new tail using the leatherworking and blacksmithing skills he learned from working in Gobber's shop. I guess that means his alt account is for mining and skinning. We get a few scenes of Hiccup and Toothless training with Toothless's new tail. Since the tail is mechanical, Hiccup has to change it manually, like shifting gears in a car. After some dry runs, it culminates in a dramatic scene of the two working together to narrowly avoid rocky outcrops in their way. And this is one of the best scenes in the movie, with their budding friendship tested, set to some excellent music, with raw instincts guiding them along.
Come on!
The movie formed their bond early, while the book held it back for a dramatic twist during the climax. And the movie does such a good job getting this duo to work together that you can't help but cheer when they charge into battle together. Both work perfectly fine, but I think I prefer the movie's take on it because we don't see something like this as often. While all that's going on, Stoic has returned from another unsuccessful hunt for the dragon's nest. Fortunately, Gobber has some good news about Hiccup.
Hiccup?
Who would have thought it, eh? He has this way with the beasts.
Stoic is ecstatic to hear about Hiccup's new reputation, and even has a gift for him.
Thanks.
Your mother would have wanted you to have it. It's half of her breastplate.
I think you're being a little generous with that cup size, Stoic. But not everyone is happy about Hiccup's progress. After the village elder selects Hiccup for finishing first in his training class, Astrid follows him to find out how he got so good, and she's shocked to discover that he's been hanging out with a dragon this entire time.
Astrid? Toothless. Toothless? Astrid. Da-da-da, we're dead.
Fortunately, Hiccup is able to convince Astrid, amid a kidnapping, to give him a chance to explain. Unfortunately, Toothless doesn't like her and decides to be a little brat.
Toothless, what are you doing? We need her to like us! And now the spinning. Thank you for nothing, you useless reptile.
But eventually, Astrid apologizes and starts to see things from Hiccup's perspective, and they spend hours flying among the clouds and enjoying the sights.
Alright, I admit it. This is pretty cool.
You know, even for Vikings, these kids get remarkably little supervision. As Hiccup and Astrid enjoy their midnight carpet ride, Toothless suddenly veers off course and converges with a swarm of other dragons.
It looks like they're hauling in their kill.
What does that make us?
The dragons all lead the way to a huge nest, and that's when we see this monster.
What is that?
Behold the Alpha, a dragon so huge that it defies anything the Vikings previously considered possible. While it's never given an exact species name, it looks remarkably similar to something called the Green Death from the book, but more on that in a bit. At the same time in the book, Hiccup had to prepare for Thor's Day Thursday, a celebratory event in which the boys would demonstrate their new dragons and how well they've been doing in training. The celebration also includes an axe fighting display, an egg eating competition, and an ugly baby contest.
Damn, that's an ugly baby.
But unlike their movie counterparts who formed an unusual but vital bond, book Toothless and Hiccup had more of an uneasy, fair-weather friendship. It was so rough around the edges that the two of them caused a real big commotion during the demonstration, which led to a fight amongst all the other dragons. And that meant that not only did they fail, but the rest of the class failed. And according to Viking law, all the students had to be exiled, never to return. Instead of the grand festival from the book, the movie has Hiccup's final exam against the monstrous nightmare. While smaller in scope, it serves a similar purpose in that it's a big demonstration of Hiccup's ability, which he ends up failing. Though to be fair, that isn't his fault.
Stop the fight.
No! I need you all to see this. They're not what we think they are. We don't have to kill them.
I said stop the fight!
Stoic interrupts the trial and nearly gets Hiccup killed, which forces Toothless to intervene. But jumping into an arena surrounded by angry Vikings has its risks.
Oh, no, please, just don't hurt him!
Toothless is then captured and thrown into what looks like the dragon equivalent of getting thrown into stocks. Cue the internet hashtags. Stoic confronts Hiccup about secretly keeping a dragon, and this is where Hiccup's lie comes apart at the seams.
So everything in the ring, a trick? A lie?
I screwed up. I should have told you before now. You take this out on me. Be mad at me, but please, just don't hurt Toothless.
And this is the moment where the liar-revealed plotline falls apart, as they are designed to do, but there's one simple reason why it works here when it's failed hundreds of times before. Hiccup's actions weren't inherently selfish. He wasn't trying to prop himself up as a badass or some legendary hero. He was trying to defend a new friend from a society that wasn't ready to accept him. There's a real reason to hold back, and Hiccup does try to introduce the idea of dragons not being that bad, though it doesn't work, thus justifying his concerns. It's a well thought out plot element with flawed, likable characters. But then there's the matter of how Stoic handles the situation.
You've thrown your lot in with them. You're not a Viking. You're not my son.
In this moment, Stoic is caught up in his emotions from being forced to defend his village and seeing his son side with an enemy he's hated his entire life. As we see in the second movie, Stoic blames dragons for killing his wife, so this revelation hits him especially hard. He chooses to lead his people instead of listening to his son because it's more familiar to him and closer to what he sees as right. The stress of being chief and upholding island law drives a lot of his decisions, almost as much as his desire for revenge.
Can you not see that I have bigger problems? Winter is almost here, and I have an entire village to feed.
And this actually isn't far off from what Stoic in the book had to face. After the boys failed in their trial, Viking law stated that they were to be forced into exile. While Stoic absolutely didn't want to kick his own son and heir off the island, he had to consider the needs of the many over the needs of the few. After all, if he didn't, then the gods might react and curse them. But before he could see punishment through, disaster struck. An enormous dragon washed on shore, postponing the exile. This monster was a rare species called a Sea Dragonus Giganticus Maximus, and he called himself the Green Death. Hiccup was sent to talk to the dragon, who said that he planned to eat all the Vikings of Berk once he had fully roused from his centuries-long nap. He was just going to do it casually, which makes him the best kind of evil to fight. Lazy evil!
Woo! I'm having Monstroso attack venture with paperwork!
They face something similar in the movie. When Stoic and his raid party land at the Dragon's Nest, having used Toothless as a compass, they encounter the Alpha, and he's far larger than anything they could deal with.
Odin, help us.
According to the Wikipedia page, this thing is called the Red Death, though it's never named in the movie.
Release my family and that will be the end of this. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you, and I will kill you.
No, not that one. This dragon is gigantic, fearsome, and incredibly lethal. He just doesn't talk. Stoic and his raiders would have been wiped out if not for a miraculous intervention when Hiccup leads the other teens on dragonback.
Every bit the boar-headed, stubborn Viking you ever were.
While the adults left, Hiccup stirred the other teens into action, freeing their training dragons and running them into battle.
Look at us! We're on a dragon! We're on dragons! All of us!
Though I am a little disappointed the terrible Terror didn't come along. He could have helped by nibbling on the Red Death's nose. The adults were just about as worthless in the book. While they argued amongst themselves about how to deal with the Green Death, Hiccup took the other boys from the tournament and all their dragons and came up with a plan. It turned out there was another giant dragon on the other side of the island. So Hiccup got both of the territorial titans to fight each other to the death. He rallied his classmates' dragons and used them to lead the massive dragons in a chase until the Titanic twins clashed. And the plan worked. The dragons thrashed each other furiously until both were mortally wounded and not a single citizen of Berk got so much as a splinter. Hiccup stood out as a leader, one who could combine a group of boys who beforehand thought nothing of him. And in that way, it kind of outdid the movie. While the fight against the Red Death is an absolute spectacle that I've rewatched more times than I can recall, Hiccup and Toothless stand far and away as the MVPs. Yes, Hiccup teaches the others how to ride dragons and leads them into battle, but that's only the first half of the climax. Once Toothless gets free and joins Hiccup, the two completely dominate the skies while the others get to sit back and watch. This scene is less about Hiccup's leadership and more about his bond with Toothless. But our two main characters are the only ones who do any real damage to the Red Death. It's just an incomplete display of leadership is all. And yes, I'm aware of how nitpicky I sound. But the movie's fight is nothing short of incredible. Hiccup and Toothless get the Red Death to chase them into a cloud of volcanic ash, where the monster could neither see nor smell them. After tearing a few holes in Red Death's wings, our heroes were able to set the dragon on fire from the inside moments before crashing on the beach like a leathery bomb. However, Toothless's spare fin was damaged, which leads to him crashing into Red Death's club tail, where he loses Hiccup.
No! No!
We're then treated to a very sobering scene where at first it seems like Hiccup might not have survived the fall, only to show that Toothless had protected him from most of the impact. And it doesn't matter that I've seen this scene dozens of times, I always get choked up at this point.
He's alive! You brought him back alive!
Dude, are you crying? No, shut up! While the book doesn't have this tear-jerker finisher, Hiccup is still put in mortal danger. As an act of revenge before dying, the Green Death ate Hiccup and planned to burn the rest of the island with his fire breath. Hiccup got lucky and managed to grab a spear stuck inside Green Death's throat and hung on for dear life. That's when he discovered that dragonfire came from a fuel and a spark inside the neck, again much like a flamethrower. Thinking quickly, Hiccup jammed the helmet's horns inside the 2 holes that made the spark.
Giggity, giggity, giggity.
Because of that, Green Death filled up with a fuel that he couldn't ignite and exploded. Toothless even toughened up long enough to swoop in, grab Hiccup, and pull him out of the sea dragon's mouth before it was too late. But during the escape, Toothless was injured, collapsed, and passed out. We got a brief death scare like we did in the movie, as the rest of the village thought Toothless was dead and he was set to be cremated. However, he was just in a coma. Hiccup had to run to save him, but he managed it just in time, which confused some of the villagers who thought they were at a barbecue. But both stories end happily, with both Hiccup and Toothless getting accepted by the village and a promise for future adventures.
While other places have ponies or parrots, we have dragons.
The movie is an absolute roller coaster of emotion and action, with some lighthearted segments and comedy sprinkled in. The characters are likable, Toothless is a badass, and the story is a total blast. The pacing is on point, and the whole movie feels so well balanced that you'll never be bored, even after several viewings. Now, if only there was a reason why the adults had Scandinavian accents and the kids didn't. The movie gets a 5 out of 5. While the books are obviously meant for a younger audience, they still have lots of passion put into them. Cal put quite a bit of thought into the world, the different Viking clans, and she has a very broad range of different dragon types. The dragons are like very large, very stubborn dogs. Helpful if you can train them correctly, but there's still that annoying phase where they poop in the house. Again, the illustrations are kinda crude, but they give a good idea of who and what the characters are, and I'm sure kids will still really like them. The books aren't really my thing, but I can respect a decent product when I see it. The first book gets a 4 out of 5. While I do like both the books and movies, they are almost nothing alike. The characters have changed, the world is different, they don't tell the same story, and everything about Toothless was altered for the film. There are plenty of lateral similarities between the mediums, and there's a decent transition in themes, but there are far too many character and plot differences to call it consistent. Just about the only things that stay the same are the names. As an adaptation, How to Train Your Dragon gets a 2 out of 5. Now I hope you can see why you should check out both of these stories. Sure, I may be a little bit of a fanboy, but anything that reminds me of my cats wins my favor. Ash, stop tormenting your sister! Knock it off, both of you!
Everything we know about you guys is wrong.